India kicked off its general elections on Thursday. What factors will determine who will be the country's next prime minister, and what will that mean for neighboring China? And Chinese investment in Australia dropped by over a third last year. What factors contributed to the plunge? How is the business climate in Australia for Chinese investors? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Lu Xin. India started its general elections on Thursday with the economy, unemployment and national security expected to play key roles in voters' decisions. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Hindu nationalist party, the BJP, are seeking re-election after a landslide victory in 2014. But the competition is looking fiercer than ever before, with Rahul Gandhi, head of the main opposition Congress party, proving to be a rival to be reckoned with. China, India's neighbor and largest trading partner, will be watching the results closely. What's at stake for India and its neighbors in this election? What might tip the scales in Modi's favor or against? Joining me for the discussion are T.G. Suresh, Associate Professor at the Center for Political Studies of the School of Social Sciences at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, and in the Beijing studio, Professor Rong, Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Professor Suresh, let me go to you. Now, we understand that about 900 million voters will go to the polls to decide who will be running the country, and the elections are supposed to run until later next month too, and the results are expected to be announced on May the 23rd. So first, please explain to us, how significant are these elections in setting the tone for the near future for India?
Thank you for having me. First of all, given India's vast geographical extent and the diversity of, say, different regional unit, we can see the elections are far more complex. And then I think India is now at a very decisive, period. India is going through a major transformative phase, partly because of as we can easily understand, India has not been able to transform deeply economically, and India does face serious problems with how to overcome, say, absolute poverty that affect a large number of Indian people, and also join the world economic forces today. Therefore, this election going to be a very defining election for India's electorate. To begin with, if we think about elections, although the government tried to make this election to be a federal election, make it into a competition between two leading, say, figures led by the ruling government and by the opposition, but at the ground level we get a slightly different picture, because in different region we have a different set of issues. However, rising unemployment and crisis in the farm sector, and also the Indian economy is yet to recover from the demonetization that the government introduced earlier. So given all these factors, the present government is facing an uphill challenge from mainly because of the erosion of its own, say, legitimacy in the eyes of a larger electorate, especially the rural voters. And also we have a sense, we understand that the erosion of a legitimacy also among those social groups who supported this government in the beginning, especially professionals, and that the story of the aspiring India, it was that story that made this government brought this government into power. But now there is a big change in that national mode.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I understand that Modi is leading in the polls, but how much of a challenge is it going to be against all of the things, all of the erosion of the legitimacy or the kind of strong strengths of the Modi leadership? Professor Suresh.
Because it's still, you can see that We can see that Modi still has an appeal to electorate in some part of India where you can see the mobilization of Hindu nationalist feelings are far more stronger. But India is not a country which you can say that every part of the India people go through same experience. So the BJP was not able to say mobilize Hindu nationalism in across India. They succeeded in some part of India, but in other part of India, people have they have very different approaches to and responses to such identity-based politics. They want far more secular, modern, economic kind of issues to be debated during elections, and they want the government to address those kinds of problems. Therefore, if the government is government wanted to return to power only on the basis of Hindu nationalism and questions of national security,
be difficult.
And such emotional appeal, it is too difficult.
Yeah. Professor Rong, how much is China, how much are people like you, Chinese scholars or the Chinese government officials paying attention to this election? Is it very crucial for China-Indian relations going forward?
Indeed, I think Chinese scholars, Chinese analysts are watching this election, with great interest, and also certainly I think in the hope that it would produce a strong government that would able to deliver, particularly in terms of pushing continue the transformation economically and socially, so that India will continue to be kind of a market, an emerging market, for Chinese investors. And at the international front, I think China is also, looking forward to working closely with a strong India that would help the developing countries in general to work together with countries like other developing countries like China to safeguard and protect the interests of developing country, and to uphold the multilateralism and other issues that I think helps the world to become more stable and prosperous. So the Chinese certainly as a neighbor, close neighbor, and also partner for cooperation with India are watching very closely and wish them all the best.
Well, is China happy with the news that Modi is for now in the polls leading?
Well, certainly I think China, this is of course up to the Indian voters to decide who, how, and it will be. And I think certainly I think there are many sort of possibilities. And if the Indian voters believe that Prime Minister Modi deserves a second term, certainly it would show more continuity in terms of the relationship with China. After all, the past 5 years have seen the relationship between the two countries as growing steady and strong, and particularly at the leadership level since the informal summit between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi in Wuhan. And I think the sort of a framework has agreed that the two leaders will set up, will provide strategic guidance for the relationship, and they have reached many common sort of understanding that should be translated into kind of a consensus at the society level, and also translated into action that have been implemented. So China is very much looking for it. But China is also happy and would happy to live with whatever outcomes come, because after all, I think if we look at the past decades of the relationship more or less, I think, has been not very much subject to the change of the government in India. Rather, it has been seen,
so you're saying
steady and strong.
Basically, there is some kind of mechanism to safeguard the relationship moving forward relatively stable, in a stable manner after a couple of years of caretaking from both sides. Is that what you're saying? Because Prime Minister Modi in a recent interview acknowledged that both India and China have accepted that we have differences, but our objective is that these differences don't turn into disputes. Does that provide a solid basis for any future potential ups and downs for bilateral ties?
Yeah, indeed. I think if you look at the past sort of years of interactions and relationship between the two countries, there has been a very strong sort of consensus that the relationship is very important to each other. And China and India are neighbors. We are neighbors and partners for cooperation. And the two sides see each other as an opportunity for development. So I think that the past 5 years have seen the leaders of the two countries have interacting very closely. And as I said, that has developed a kind of framework. Which I think take the form of that formal informal summit, and I believe that if Prime Minister Modi continue to win the re-election, certainly that formula will continue.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think the strategic understanding and I think the overall relationship will continue.
Yeah, but however, last month, India's Congress Party leader, the opposition leader, Rahul Gandhi, claimed that Modi was weak and scared of Chinese President Xi Jinping. He tweeted that weak Modi is scared of Xi. Not a word comes out of his mouth when China acts against India. Professor Rong first and then Professor Suresh. So please do, both of you, please keep your answers short. Will it mean a derailment of bilateral ties if Rahul Gandhi is elected? Professor Rong?
I don't see a kind of a derail of relationship, even though the Congress takes over. Rather, I think I would take these remarks by Rahul Gandhi as a kind of a rhetoric for election. After all, I think if you look at the Congress, when they were in power, the China-India relationship has also been developed quite strong and steady.
Yeah, Professor Suresh, your take on the kind of impact on China if Modi wins or if he loses?
Yeah, either way, for India's relationship with China is extremely important, and all major political parties in India understand and recognize the fact that India's relationship with China is very important, very significant, and needs to be approached with extreme care. As Professor Rung was saying, sometime during Indian elections, this kinds of statement can be a sort of a political posturing, basically to for the audience in India. But I think there will not going to be any major change or direction in the say bilateral relation between India and China. Whether the BJP government continues after the election or a new government led by Congress party comes to power.
Okay.
But some of the basic say structures, basic understanding that developed over the years are continued to be there. But which way whether this understanding will mature into a new level, that depends on again both the countries and how do they respond to each other's concerns and
and I think
etc.
And I think the people-to-people exchange is a very important factor there, and I think a very good development since the last year is a new mechanism to reinforce that kind of exchange. Personally, I watched the India movie Dangal, was that how? Dangal, yes, about this wrestling romance story. Professor Rong, how important it is, or how much uncertainty is there from this election to people-to-people exchanges that have been gaining momentum in the past year?
I believe that despite the changes, in India, politically, it would not affect the growing interactions, people-to-people interaction between China and India. And I've seen that, as you said, the movies are now being very popular. Indian movie, the Bollywood, has become very popular in China, and also, more and more Chinese visitors are going, and then more and more people are interested in Indian culture and others. So I thought that this is a very positive development for the bilateral relationship.
Well, looking forward to the results and seeing how India-China relations are going to be improving continuously in the future. Many thanks to T.G. Suresh, Associate Professor at the Center for Political Studies of the School of Social Sciences at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. I said it correctly this time. And in the Beijing studio, Professor Rong, Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies. You're watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break, and coming up after that, what's behind the recent drop in Chinese investment in Australia, and how has the business climate for Chinese investors been changing? We'll discuss the finding of a recent survey of Chinese investment in Australia. Stay with us.